police. Step outside right now.
Officer, what is this regarding?
I don't need to explain. Step out.
You are at my residence. Do you have a warrant?
Don't make this difficult.
This is an unlawful entry and it's being recorded.
The camera blinked on automatically, the familiar chime echoing softly through Judge Malcolm Reed's apartment. He glanced at the screen, a quiet hallway, dimly lit, the elevator doors just closing. Nothing unusual, just the end of another late evening. Then movement. A uniformed figure stepped into frame. Officer Travis Holt. Not a visitor, not a neighbor. A man with a badge and authority, walking deliberately toward his door. No knock, no announcement. Just a heavy step forward, a shoulder pressing into the wood. The doorbell camera captured every inch, every second. Reed's hand froze halfway to the door. He opened it halfway, as he always did when someone unexpected appeared. Calm, measured. Officer, what is this regarding? Holt didn't answer, didn't acknowledge the question. Instead, he leaned forward, forcing the door wider, stepping into the threshold as if the apartment itself was his to command. Reed's calm didn't waver. His voice remained steady, professional. Do you have a warrant? Another officer lingered behind Holt, silent, hesitant. No one stopped the intrusion. No one intervened. The camera recorded the tension, a hallway bathed in muted light, a door partially open, authority ignoring procedure. Holt's tone sharpened. Don't make this difficult. A phrase delivered like a threat disguised as instruction. No explanation, no justification. Just the assertion of power. The apartment, a place meant for safety and privacy, felt suddenly vulnerable. The air thickened, the silence punctuated by the faint hum of electronics, the soft ticking of a clock. Nothing Reed had done could have warranted this. Nothing in the law supported this. Yet here he stood, calm, recorded, witnessing a line crossed before his very eyes. The second officer shifted weight, uncomfortable, but remained silent. The hallway was empty, the chime of the elevator long gone. Yet the force of authority filled the space, heavy and unrelenting. And through it all, the doorbell camera captured the full breach. Every step forward, every shoulder against the door, every second of hesitation that could have stopped this, all frozen in digital clarity. Reed didn't move to resist. He didn't shout. He simply observed, quietly marking the moment. Shock, disbelief, violation. A home is supposed to be the one place where law is your ally, not your adversary. But tonight, even a judge, sworn to protect the law, felt the weight of authority wielded without accountability. The breach ended, for now, only when Holt finally entered. But the recording told a story far bigger than a single intrusion. It told of power unchecked, procedure ignored, and a line crossed that no one should ever tolerate, and every frame was preserved. The camera didn't blink. It didn't judge. It only recorded. And in doing so, it became the first witness to the violation, a silent observer to the moment where law met lawlessness. Malcolm Reed's voice, steady as ever, reminded whoever was watching. This is an unlawful entry, and it's being recorded. And with that, the story was already unfolding, frame by frame, for the world to see. Judge Malcolm Reed is the kind of man people notice without trying, not for his height, or the quiet authority in his step, or the deep, measured voice he carries, though all of that is true, but for the way he carries the law itself. For over 18 years, he has sat on the state court bench, listening to arguments, weighing evidence, and making decisions that change lives. Decisions where fairness, procedure, and constitutional rights were never negotiable. Before he was a judge, Reed spent years as a public defender. He learned the law from the ground up, representing clients who had no voice, no resources, and no one to fight for them. Those years shaped him. They instilled in him a deep understanding of what happens when authority is unchecked and unaccountable, when procedure is ignored, when individuals are powerless to defend themselves. It's why, as a judge, he's known for strict adherence to constitutional procedure, not because it's convenient, but because he's seen firsthand what happens when it isn't followed. Malcolm Reed lives alone in a quiet apartment building, in a neighborhood where elevators hum softly and hallway carpets absorb footsteps. He's a solitary man in some ways, disciplined, deliberate, and private. There's no history of conflict, no late-night complaints from neighbors, no incidents with law enforcement. Nothing to suggest he would ever attract the kind of attention that would bring officers to his door in the middle of the evening. And yet, here he is, standing behind that door, calm, but watching authority test the very rules he's sworn to uphold. The irony is palpable. A judge, trained to protect the rights of all citizens, now must demand those same rights for himself, for his home, his privacy, and his safety. It is a reversal that feels almost surreal. Outside, the world expects deference from everyone. Inside, the law is supposed to protect him. But authority doesn't always obey the law, and sometimes, power acts first and asks questions later. Reed's colleagues and peers describe him as meticulous, fair, and unflinching. In the courtroom, he is steady, authoritative, and even-tempered. He listens first, responds second, and always demands that procedure guide action. Lawyers know him as someone who respects the process, someone whose decisions are rooted in law, not politics, not personality, not pressure from the moment. In short, he is a guardian of the system, the kind of professional whose reputation alone inspires trust, and whose presence commands respect. But now, in his apartment, the familiarity of that system is gone. He is no longer presiding over courtroom proceedings. He is not the person delivering rulings that others follow. He is, simply, a citizen in his home, confronted by uniformed authority ignoring procedure, stepping into space that is legally his. He asks for a warrant, calmly, repeatedly, citing the very protections he has upheld for decades. The request is simple, measured, reasonable, yet it is treated as resistance, not compliance. In this quiet, upscale building, nothing about Judge Reed's life would predict confrontation. He pays his bills on time. He keeps to routines. He interacts politely with neighbors and building staff. His world is one of order, respect, and law. And yet, the law, in this moment, seems almost suspended, replaced by the impulse of a single officer who sees his own authority as sufficient justification. The contrast is stark, almost cinematic. A man who has spent a lifetime ensuring procedure is followed is now forced to demand it for himself. His calm, deliberate demeanor contrasts sharply with the aggression of those who would bypass it. The dignity he carries, earned over decades of public service, stands against impulsive force. And the camera captures it all, the doorframe a boundary between legality and violation, authority and overreach, personal safety and public intrusion. This is not just a story of a judge at home. It is a story about what happens when the protections designed to safeguard all citizens are ignored. It is a story about irony, about a man who has devoted his life to justice, now confronting injustice personally. And it is a story that will unfold, frame by frame, revealing both the fragility of assumed rights and the resilience of someone who understands them better than most. Malcolm Reed is not an ordinary citizen, but in this moment, the rules that usually protect him are the same rules that the intruder ignores. The stage is set, the players are in motion, and the camera is watching, as it always does. The law is on pause, and the man who enforces it must now insist upon it for himself. The phone call came in around 9:17 p.m., a brief, almost casual note through the dispatch line. An anonymous tip, someone had allegedly heard worrying things about Judge Malcolm Reed. The details were vague. No threats, no immediate danger, no evidence of violence, no signs that anyone inside the apartment posed a risk to themselves or others. Just a whisper, carried over the wires, filtered through a system designed to prioritize safety. By 9:45, Officer Travis Holt had been assigned. The official report later described it as a wellness check. But when the doorbell camera began recording, it quickly became apparent that this was not a routine check. A wellness check is meant to ensure a person's safety, a way to verify that someone who might be in danger is okay. It is not a free pass to enter someone's home without consent, without warrant, without cause. Yet that is exactly what transpired. There was no accompanying report of danger. Number 911 call. No verified emergency. No neighbor screaming, no fire alarm, no signs of immediate risk. Holt did not document any exigent circumstances. In fact, when the footage and internal reports were later reviewed, there was no record at all of why a forced entry was necessary. The decision to push the door open had been made in the moment, spontaneously, based on a single, unverified tip. Holt approached the door with urgency, yet without justification. The timeline, reconstructed from body cam and doorbell footage, shows him stepping into the hallway with deliberate purpose at 9:52. Within 3 minutes, he had made the choice to force entry, without consulting a supervisor, without waiting for backup, without obtaining a warrant. The law is clear. Exigent circumstances or consent are required. None existed here. The video captures the threshold of a home being crossed before the judge could even understand what was happening. The officer's explanation at the scene was clipped, professional sounding, but hollow. "We're checking on you. Step outside." No elaboration. No reason. No acknowledgement of the legal protections that apply to every citizen, no matter their title. When Judge Reed asked if a warrant existed, Holt brushed it aside, leaning on the assumed authority of the badge, as if personal judgment could substitute for procedure. It is a crucial point. This wasn't a carefully considered operation. This wasn't a situation in which every box had been checked. There was no evidence, no verified threat, no paperwork. The choice to force entry was a single officer's decision, in the moment, based on an anonymous report of vague concern. That raises the question the entire episode forces on viewers. Why force entry? Why escalate when the person inside clearly presents no immediate danger, no threat, no reason to bypass the law? And yet, the footage tells the story of action before justification. A badge becomes authority, and authority becomes action. The video shows Reed standing calmly, asking legitimate questions, requesting a warrant. Holt's response is immediate escalation, physically entering the space without legal grounds. The second officer is present, silent, doing nothing to intervene. The scene is small, a hallway, a door, a few seconds, but the implications are enormous. This is the moment when legality and authority diverge. The timeline makes it clear that there was no deliberation, no verification, no procedural justification. The decision to force entry was made entirely on impulse. And in doing so, it transforms a routine wellness check, a measure designed to protect, into a violation. The law requires consent or a warrant. The law requires reason. None were provided. For viewers, the question is immediate and unavoidable. Why? Why ignore procedure? Why dismiss a citizen's rights, a judge's rights, no less? In a place meant to be private and safe. The anonymous call was the spark, but the fire was human decision, unchecked. Holt's choice, made on the spot, created a chain of events that would eventually be scrutinized, recorded, and shared with the public. And that question, why force entry, would hang over the entire story, demanding answers from everyone involved. This context makes clear that the breach was not an accident. It was not misunderstanding. It was an active choice made without the legal justification required in a system designed to protect people. The wellness check, intended to safeguard, becomes a lens through which viewers can see what happens when authority substitutes judgment for law. And the very protections Judge Reed spent decades upholding are tested in his own home. Judge Reed's calm, steady voice echoed slightly in the narrow hallway as he repeated himself, more insistently this time. "Officer, you must leave. I am requesting that you leave my apartment immediately." Each word was measured, deliberate, meant to assert authority without aggression, meant to remind the men at his door that he was not just any resident. He was someone trained in the law, someone who understood exactly what rights were being trampled. Holt did not pause. He didn't acknowledge the request, didn't slow down, didn't consider the constitutional weight of the words coming from the man standing before him. Instead, he leaned forward, hands slightly raised in a posture that suggested both threat and impatience. "We have probable cause," he said, clipped and sharp, "and we are entering." There was no explanation, no documentation, no factual basis for probable cause. Nothing in the call, nothing in the dispatch report, nothing in the unfolding situation that justified overriding a citizen's Fourth Amendment protections. But Holt relied on the assumption that authority itself was sufficient, that the badge carried weight greater than the Constitution. That procedure was optional if perceived risk could be claimed. The second officer lingered behind, silent. He made no move to intervene, made no request to clarify, made no attempt to prevent what was unfolding. The body cam captured it all. The threshold between private home and public authority blurred as Holt pressed further. His shoulder nudged against the doorframe. His foot crossed the line into the apartment. The camera recorded every angle, the hesitation of the second officer, the calm resistance of the judge, the illegal intrusion as it began. Judge Reed did not resist. He did not shout. He did not struggle. He did not give the officers a reason to escalate further. He stepped aside, allowing Holt to fully enter, maintaining a posture of compliance while still asserting his rights. Every inch of his body communicated non-resistance, but not consent. Every word from his lips demanded legality. There is no warrant. There is no exigency. You are violating my rights. Holt moved with certainty, as if he had permission without the need for verification. He spoke in clipped sentences, making assertions about law he did not substantiate. Step aside, he commanded. We are allowed to enter. The words were almost banal, but the weight behind them, the unchallenged assumption of authority, made them threatening. The apartment, normally a sanctuary, was no longer safe. The doorbell camera captured it all, a silent witness to the violation. It recorded the precise moment the law was ignored, the exact point where authority replaced due process. It recorded Reed's calm demeanor, his eyes scanning for signs of escalation, his voice never raising, never breaking, while Holt asserted control without justification. It recorded every step into the private space, every deliberate movement meant to occupy, to dominate, to act as if legality was irrelevant. What unfolded next was not dramatic in the physical sense. There was no struggle, no loud confrontation, no immediate danger. But the significance was enormous. A judge, someone whose daily work relies on law being applied consistently, was witnessing it being ignored in real time. The intrusion itself, fully captured on video, was evidence of constitutional violation. The second officer remained passive, providing silent complicity. Holt moved through the apartment, glancing around, asserting presence, as if to establish control over a domain that was not his to govern. Every step, every movement, every decision to ignore questions and continue forward reinforced the breach. Reed's restraint contrasted sharply with the officer's aggression. He knew that reaction could escalate the situation further, but he also knew the law would eventually see this moment clearly, recorded and undeniable. In his mind, every second was being logged, not just in the camera, but in his memory, to be referenced in reports, in court, in pursuit of accountability. Holt continued his motion, claiming authority that had no basis. The door, now fully open, no longer separated public from private. The camera captured it all, a judge, compliant but unconsenting, observing the complete disregard for procedure. This wasn't a question of intent, it was a question of legality. The footage showed it unmistakably. Authority exercised without accountability, the law ignored in the very home of someone trained to uphold it, a constitutional violation unfolding in plain view. By the time Holt stopped moving, the apartment had been entered fully, the line between lawful procedure and illegal intrusion crossed entirely. Reed's demeanor never faltered. He remained composed, observant, and measured, a man whose life had been defined by law now forced to confront its absence. The camera captured it, freezing the moment as undeniable evidence that authority, unchecked, could violate rights even in the most personal of spaces. This was escalation in its quiet, insidious form. Law ignored, procedure bypassed, personal space violated, all under the guise of authority. And the camera, silent and impartial, recorded every second, setting the stage for accountability to finally catch up. The moment Judge Malcolm Reed realized what had occurred in his apartment, the first thing he did was request the footage. The doorbell camera had captured everything, every second, every movement, every word. In a few simple frames, the truth was preserved, unalterable, undeniable. He didn't need witnesses. He didn't need speculation. He had the camera, the silent observer that the officers could not manipulate, that the law could not ignore. When the footage was reviewed, it immediately painted a story starkly different from the narrative the police would later attempt to present. There was no threat, no raised voices from the judge, no signs of physical danger, no emergency demanding urgent action. The judge had opened the door calmly, asking questions, citing his legal rights, requesting a warrant, the very things officers are trained to respect. Yet Officer Holt's actions on the video told a different story. He had approached the door with deliberate haste, shoulder pressing against the threshold, stepping fully inside without consent, without explanation, without justification. His movements were deliberate and measured, a forced presence, a claim of authority over space that was not his to command. He spoke in clipped, commanding sentences, interrupting the judge and dismissing legal questions, all while the second officer looked on silently, doing nothing to stop the breach. The audio told a story even more revealing. Holt claimed urgency and probable cause, but the recording exposed the emptiness of his assertions. He made no mention of specific facts, no evidence of threat, no signs of immediate danger. Every word, captured by the doorbell camera, contradicted the police report he would later file. According to that report, he had been conducting a welfare check in the face of imminent risk. In reality, the footage showed a calm judge, a home unthreatened, and officers escalating unnecessarily. Once the video was in hand, Reed and his counsel knew the implications immediately. This wasn't just evidence for internal review or disciplinary action. This was proof of a constitutional violation, captured in real time, with every step documented. And so, they made a strategic decision. The footage would not remain hidden. It would not sit in a drawer, invisible to the public or insulated behind bureaucratic walls. The video was released to the media, quietly at first, then widely. News outlets picked it up. Social media began to circulate short clips. The officer's shoulder forcing the door, the judge calmly asking for a warrant, the second officer standing silently. The public reaction was swift and unmistakable. Outrage spread across platforms. Commenters and journalists alike condemned the intrusion. Questions poured in. How could this happen? Why was a judge, trained in the law, subjected to what looked like an unlawful home invasion? How many other citizens faced this kind of unchecked authority? As the video circulated, the narrative began to collapse. Official statements attempting to justify the entry as a wellness check fell flat in the face of the footage. Headlines that initially leaned on the police's version of events shifted. Judge's home intruded by officers. Doorbell camera captures entire incident. Unwarranted police entry at judge's residence sparks outrage. Body cam shows officer forcing entry into judge's apartment. The contrast between the official reports and the objective reality captured on video became impossible to ignore. The public was not only watching, they were dissecting, analyzing, and amplifying the story. Lawyers, activists, and commentators noted the absence of exigent circumstances. Constitutional scholars highlighted the Fourth Amendment violation. Social media users shared frame-by-frame breakdowns of the video, pointing out every missed protocol, every ignored legal standard, every action that contradicted policy. The doorbell camera became a courtroom before the courtroom, a record of truth broadcast for all to see. Even within the department, the video had an impact. The footage forced superiors to acknowledge what had happened in ways internal reports could not. Denials and misstatements from the officers involved were contradicted instantly, frame by frame, audio by audio. The weight of public scrutiny was immediate. Comments from colleagues and external observers alike highlighted the chilling implications. If a state court judge could have his home entered without consent or warrant, what did that mean for ordinary citizens? The video's viral spread created a unique dynamic. The officer's prior complaints, once dismissed or overlooked, were suddenly relevant again. Holt's history of questionable conduct now appeared as a pattern rather than an isolated incident. Each previous warning, each report of overreach, became context for understanding this latest violation. The footage was not just evidence of one incident. It was proof of systemic failure, of unchecked authority in action. Through it all, Judge Reed remained calm. His statement accompanying the release emphasized a single point. The law exists to protect, not to be ignored. He did not exaggerate or dramatize. He simply presented the facts as captured on camera, letting the evidence speak for itself. The narrative that had initially favored the officers, that this was a routine welfare check, conducted with proper care, was now untenable. The footage dismantled it completely. And as public awareness grew, so did pressure. Media outlets continued coverage, civil rights organizations issued statements, and legal experts weighed in. The The department was no longer able to maintain the story it had initially told. Transparency had entered the equation, and with it came accountability. The doorbell camera, quiet and impartial, had become the central figure in the story. It had recorded the unaltered truth, contradicting official reports, challenging authority, and mobilizing public outrage. What began as a simple tool for home security transformed into undeniable evidence, a record of an unlawful intrusion, captured in real time, impossible to refute. By the end of this phase, the public knew exactly what had happened. The officers had entered without warrant, without emergency, without cause. The judge had asked for the law to be followed, and his requests were ignored. The narrative of procedural justification had crumbled under the weight of reality, and the stage was set for the next phase: legal action, accountability, and the pursuit of justice. This footage would not be forgotten. It had exposed more than a single violation. It had illuminated a failure in procedure, a lapse in oversight, and a stark reminder that authority, unchecked, can infringe on the very rights it is sworn to protect. The public's response had already begun to reshape the conversation, forcing institutions to confront uncomfortable truths. And all of it had started with the silent, unwavering eye of a doorbell camera, capturing the moment the law met defiance, and the truth followed. The moment the footage went public, it became undeniable. A clear, documented violation of rights had taken place. For Judge Malcolm Reed, calm and methodical as ever, the next step was not emotional reaction but legal action. The law was both his profession and his protection, and in this instance, it had been flagrantly ignored. He retained civil rights counsel, a team experienced in constitutional law, police accountability, and civil litigation. Together, they moved quickly, preparing to file a federal lawsuit against both Officer Travis Holt and the city authorities responsible for oversight. The lawsuit, filed in the district court, made the claims explicit. First, there was the unlawful entry. Reed's home, his private space, had been invaded without consent, without a warrant, and without exigent circumstances. The complaint laid out every detail: the date and time of the incident, the approach by Officer Holt, the dismissal of the judge's repeated requests for a warrant, and the fact that the second officer, present during the breach, took no action to intervene. The footage from the doorbell camera was attached as incontrovertible evidence. It was not just a recording, it was a legal document capturing the violation in real time. Second, the lawsuit cited a clear Fourth Amendment violation. The Constitution protects citizens from unreasonable searches and seizures, and Reed's case was a textbook example. The footage showed that there was no immediate danger, no ongoing crime, no actionable threat inside the apartment. Holt's claim of probable cause had no factual basis. It was asserted verbally in the moment, contradicted by every piece of recorded evidence. The complaint emphasized that the law does not permit personal judgment to override constitutional protections, and that even judges are entitled to the same rights as any citizen. Third, the complaint focused on abuse of authority. The officer had used his uniform and badge to intimidate, to compel compliance, and to dismiss legitimate legal questions. Reed's repeated inquiries, his requests for a warrant, his calm insistence on procedure were ignored. The lawsuit argued that Holt's conduct demonstrated a pattern of coercion, the misuse of power, and a disregard for the very legal standards that officers are sworn to uphold. As discovery began, further revelations emerged. Records indicated that Officer Holt had been involved in multiple prior complaints alleging misuse of authority. While none had resulted in disciplinary action, the pattern of behavior was clear: instances of entering private spaces without proper cause, dismissing citizen rights, and escalating situations unnecessarily. These complaints, once minor and easily dismissed internally, now took on new weight in light of the doorbell camera footage. Additionally, internal training manuals were reviewed. Holt's department claimed that he was acting under a training exception designed for wellness checks under emergency conditions. But the review revealed that no such exception applied in Reed's case. The officer had no documentation, no prior authorization, and no protocol justification for the entry. The argument that this was permissible under training guidelines collapsed under scrutiny. The city, now facing exposure not only for the individual officer's actions, but for systemic failures in oversight, supervision, and policy, became a central defendant in the suit. The lawsuit emphasized that municipalities cannot abdicate responsibility simply because an individual officer acts unlawfully. When authority is abused and proper protocols are ignored, the institutions that allow that abuse to happen are accountable. The legal complaint carefully detailed the timeline of events: the initial anonymous call, the officer's arrival, Holt's disregard for requests, the forced entry, and the continued occupation of the apartment. Every word spoken on camera, every step across the threshold, was cataloged and cited as evidence. Reed's counsel argued that the law had been violated not once, but in multiple dimensions: personal privacy, constitutional rights, and professional protections. Public pressure amplified the legal stakes. News outlets continued to replay portions of the footage, emphasizing the officer's disregard for procedure. Civil rights organizations issued statements highlighting the broader implications for citizen rights. Legal experts explained that if a judge could have his home entered unlawfully, ordinary citizens, particularly marginalized communities, were even more vulnerable. The lawsuit, therefore, was not only personal. It was emblematic of the fight for accountability and systemic reform. The city, confronted with mounting evidence and public scrutiny, began internal investigations, yet the lawsuit framed the issue squarely. The facts, the footage, and the law left little room for dispute. This was a case of authority unrestrained, procedure ignored, and constitutional rights violated. Discovery reinforced this. Holt's prior complaints, the absence of training justification, the lack of supervisory intervention, all created a narrative of negligence and misconduct. The stage was set for a high-profile legal battle. The lawsuit sought damages for the violation of Reed's constitutional rights, for emotional distress caused by the unlawful intrusion, and for the broader implications of an abuse of power within the police department. The doorbell camera footage was central, irrefutable, and public. It had shifted the balance from allegation to proof, and in doing so, it forced both the city and the public to reckon with the consequences. In federal court filings, the argument was straightforward. A judge, an individual, a citizen, has the right to privacy in his home. Authority is not a license to override the law. Holt's actions violated the law, ignored training, and breached the city's responsibility to ensure lawful conduct. The lawsuit highlighted the chilling effect on the community when officers act without accountability, and how unchecked power can extend far beyond a single apartment, threatening the very principles the justice system is meant to protect. Every frame of that doorbell footage told the story: the step forward, the shoulder against the door, the dismissal of requests for a warrant, the calm compliance of a judge demanding legality. That visual record became the centerpiece of the legal case, the evidence upon which accountability would ultimately be measured. It proved, unequivocally, that authority without adherence to the law is not just misconduct. It is a breach of the public trust. The federal lawsuit marked the turning point. It transformed a private violation into a public reckoning. Holt's actions were no longer isolated. They were documented, scrutinized, and challenged. The city could no longer ignore systemic failures. The legal battle was underway, and the evidence was unassailable. The story was no longer just about a judge in his apartment. It was about the law itself, and how it must apply equally, even when confronting those who wield authority unchecked. After months of legal maneuvering, depositions, and the slow churn of the federal court system, the outcome became clear. The city, confronted with irrefutable evidence and mounting public scrutiny, opted to settle. The settlement acknowledged the gravity of the violation without requiring a protracted trial, a rare admission in cases involving law enforcement. Judge Malcolm Reed emerged not just as a litigant, but as a symbol of accountability, a living reminder that no badge, no uniform, and no assumption of authority can supersede the law. Officer Travis Holt was immediately removed from patrol duty. Internal investigations confirmed what the doorbell footage had already revealed: a pattern of behavior that ignored procedure, neglected supervision, and abused power. Holt's role in the intrusion became a cautionary tale within the department, prompting serious reflection on the systems meant to govern officers' conduct. His removal sent a clear message: authority carries responsibility, and violation of citizens' rights will not be tolerated, regardless of rank or experience. The city also undertook major policy revisions. Procedures for wellness checks and home entries were rewritten, emphasizing consent, documentation, and verification. Mandatory warrant confirmation became a formal requirement, ensuring that officers could no longer bypass constitutional protections based on subjective judgment. Training programs were revised, highlighting real-world scenarios where authority must intersect with law and emphasizing accountability over expedience. Supervisors were required to approve any entry into private residences, and all incidents were logged with timestamps and reviewed for compliance. The broader implications of the case rippled through the community and across media platforms. Citizens, legal experts, and civil rights organizations alike pointed to the case as an example of why vigilance is necessary when law enforcement operates in spaces that should remain private. The narrative was simple but profound. Your position, your title, your professional accomplishments. None of it guarantees immunity from unlawful intrusion. Rights must be asserted and evidence must be preserved, because the law alone does not always prevent abuse. Judge Reed's experience became a clear demonstration of that principle. His calm demeanor, measured responses, and insistence on procedure allowed the truth to be captured on camera, and it was that very evidence that ultimately determined the outcome. The doorbell footage was not just documentation. It was a shield, a witness, and a tool for justice. It proved that even when authority is misused, transparency and record-keeping can protect the citizen. The emotional impact of the incident was significant. Reed's privacy had been violated, his home infiltrated, and his personal safety momentarily compromised. Yet the resolution reinforced an important truth. Authority cannot operate unchecked, and legal safeguards exist to hold power accountable. The settlement provided financial redress, but more importantly, it underscored the principle that evidence, diligence, and procedure outweigh intimidation, force, or assumption of power. In the final analysis, the takeaway was unmistakable. Your title does not protect your rights, evidence does. Your home is the last line of privacy, and every tool that records and documents improper conduct becomes a bulwark against abuse. Cameras do not prevent misconduct, but they reveal it, offering clarity in moments where power might otherwise go unchecked. The footage from Judge Reed's doorbell camera had transformed a private violation into a public reckoning, demonstrating that truth, properly documented, can not only vindicate, but also catalyze systemic change. And so, the story concluded with a stark, almost poetic clarity. He didn't open the door to a crime. He opened it to the truth. Those words captured the essence of the case, a reminder that authority, no matter how imposing, cannot stand against evidence. The law, when paired with accountability, prevails, and even in moments of personal violation, justice can be restored through diligence, documentation, and unwavering adherence to principle. The settlement and reforms ensured that no officer could repeat the same actions unchecked, and the public saw firsthand that rights, when defended and recorded, are more powerful than authority exercised without accountability. Judge Reed's home was once again a sanctuary, and the law he had spent decades enforcing had been upheld in the most personal of spaces, his own.